Hello, this is Illy, and I am really excited today to be speaking with Allison Crosswaite. Allison is a psychotherapist based in Toronto. She writes at thegoodtherapist.com, where she has resources for ways that people can deepen their work in therapy. Her blog is beautiful. I'm a huge fan. So I highly recommend it if you're interested in checking it out. And she's going to be talking to us today about self-care and why self-care is such an important part of our work and our lives as therapists. Welcome, Allison.
Thank you, Illy. I'm so excited to be here. I'm a huge fan of your work as well. So this is just great.
Yes, and we're just going to have like a conversation where we discuss how we can take care of ourselves. And Allison's going to be sharing, you're going to be sharing your story of self-care and giving us some tips and some highlights and just digging deep into the topic. I think you'll find that Allison has a beautiful way of describing what we do, and the language that she uses is lovely. So Allison, tell us a little bit about your journey with self-care.
Sure. So this is just such a big topic. As I started to write and prepare for this class, I realized that this is really the story of my life. So obviously we're not going to get into all of it, but I think that the way I see self-care is not limited to having a bath or going to yoga, which are key things if those are helpful to you. But self-care is actually our own healing in whatever form that takes. That the healing of the therapist is the thing that allows the therapist to do the work. So I would say this: I've been practicing just over 5 years. This is a career change for me. And in those 5 years, I've experienced some of the most personally difficult things I've ever experienced. So the practice and my difficulties and losses really have overlapped. And I think that one of the things I often say about this work is that this work is the worst job in the world when you're going through your own bad day.
Yes.
There are times when it's the best job in the world, but there are times when it just hurts to sit with your own feelings and the feelings of another person when you are yourself ripped apart by things that have happened. So that has been the backdrop of becoming a therapist for me. My formation has been about forming while I have lost. And so I have really had to grapple with some of these questions in a very real way in order to keep practicing. So that's where I'm coming from. And I think that this is an active process that never ends, the self-care process. I don't think this is something that you figure out. It's always dynamic, just like every client's needs are changing all the time. So are our needs changing all the time. And I'm really excited about this class because I've got some really exciting things to share that I've come to that I hope might be interesting or helpful to other therapists. But I want to give a little more background as well to where I am with this. Because what it's become for me, this topic of self-care, it's actually become the foundation of my life, I would say. It's become my fundamental value. On the eve of the U.S. election, I'm Canadian, but we care a lot about the U.S. up here. On the eve of the election, I had this kind of dream. And the dream, the words that came to me were, self-care is devotion. And I've been working with this. And these words have kind of like, they're in my unconscious and they just come to me every once in a while. And something shifted for me on that night before there was such a surprise in the world. And I feel like it prepared me in some way to address the surprise. That it was like every moment, everything that we do is our act of devotion. Now, that's a spiritual word. You could also say it's a political act. Every moment how we act. So this is where I'm coming from with self-care, that I think in order to be who we are in the world, to our families, to our clients, to ourselves, whoever we are, whatever we do, that self-care is the core of it.
I am, as usual, just so touched. Like, as you said the word devotion, I got goosebumps. But as you talk, I feel the, I guess the peace, I think, that comes from living in a way where you are reflecting on your own life and on your own experiences and on what's happening for you, either because of an event, like you're referring to the election in the United States, because of losses, because of our work, because of how a personal situation is impacting us personally and how we carry that into the therapy room. So I'm wondering, and I don't want to veer off topic too much, so if this was something you were going to cover, great. If not, let's just spend a couple of minutes. I'm just curious how our own healing, I guess, what does that mean in terms of being able to reflect? How do you see our own healing and moving through our own healing as allowing us to devote ourselves to ourselves, which is, I think, the heart of self-care? And
yeah, this is the thing.
yeah.
Is the issue that we need healing because we are in pain of some kind. And in order to be with ourselves moment to moment, we have to experience that pain. So this is why self-care has expanded for me from relaxation to held container ways of being with the things we have experienced and with the person that we are as a result.
Perfectly stated. Yes.
Well, this is just such fundamental stuff that I'm thinking about all the time. And it really connects nicely to where I wanted to go with this, which is like presence for me is the kind of marker as to how is my self-care. Presence to myself and presence to my clients. And I know that the people listening to this we're here because we are working to be good therapists and all the other things that we are. And for me, this is a question about how we are with our clients. We have methodologies. I think this group is highly diverse in terms of the theoretical backgrounds and the perspectives, and all of that's really important. And our training in all those regards is really important. And we have techniques and theory and all this stuff. But ultimately, and the research really backs this up, which I just love, the relationship we have with our clients is the prime determinant of their success and our success. And this is about how we are with them, not what we do. So my question sort of when I'm thinking about self-care and why it's important is, are we present enough to listen to our clients? Like, to what extent are we able to follow the micro moments of what they're saying and how they're getting from A to B and how they're putting it together? Because they're saying some things, they're not saying others. And we're trying to understand the whole person. And I know there's sometimes when I'm sort of sitting back and I'm sort of getting the gist of it, but I just can't land. And sometimes that's because of the client, but sometimes that's because of me and I don't have the resources. So that's one thing. Are we present enough to listen to them? Another marker would be, can we hold our own wounds and prejudices as ours and allow them to have theirs? and this is a big one. This comes up in all sorts of ways around values and religion and politics and you name it, right? Can we be different and still care? I think, again, this is an evidence of self-care that we can do this. And the other marker of self-care that I think of whether we're sort of on the path or not is, do we allow our clients to move us? Or do we sit back and, okay, they're at this stage, like anytime we're using theory to distance ourselves from our clients is, to me, an indication that I've got a lot of feelings, right? The first thing I do when I don't know what's going on with a client is go to theory. Theory is very helpful. We need it. But if I'm always thinking about, their character disorder, I have to ask myself, what's happening over here? So,
if it's okay, I just want to jump in a little bit there because I've not heard the theory to distance idea often, but yeah, I agree. Of course, I think it's interesting how we can rely on diagnoses or to separate to other, right? So that's a term that I've heard a lot in what I'm reading for my dissertation to other, because it's on dialogue. So what you're saying resonates a lot with me because my research is on how can we love people, honestly, because of our differences, meaning that our differences are what bring us into an acknowledgement that we're both the same as human beings. And there's honestly, it's very difficult to get to that knowledge without walking through the difference. So as you talk, of course, it's beautiful. It's always nice to hear someone that's come to a similar truth, and also for the members and therapists that are listening, I think that we've all hit a point where the differences affect us, and we're in a position where now we're looking back on a session thinking, oh no, like that wasn't the most loving thing or the most therapeutic thing or the most caring thing where I went. Not that we did harm or that we got into any sort of argument, but that, as you're saying, we weren't as present as we could have been, right? So how do we deal with the disappointments in those moments? And how can we carry that to better presence?
Well, I'm going to give you the question that I wrestle with that I think addresses this in some regard.
Questions are perfect answers.
They are, aren't they?
Yes.
I'm always suspicious of a good answer. So here's the question that I'm wrestling with these days that I find really powerful. And the question is this: if you were your own therapist, what would you say to you right now? And this one always moves me because I know what I would say to my clients. Like, I would hold the failures and the hopes and the disappointments and the regrets and the complication and the struggle. And I would know that this is all part of the learning. Mm-hmm. And all part of being human. And yet for myself, there's this flagellation and it's humiliation. It's self-humiliation often the way we speak to each other. It's shocking. So this is the question that I think is worth working with. And later I'll talk about some of the things that, like the very practical things. Mm-hmm. But I think we need to struggle with that because we do ask more of ourselves than we do of the human beings who we work with.
Thank you for answering that.
Oh, you're welcome. This is so enjoyable, I have to say. day.
For me too.
Wow.
So it's really hard to not veer you off because I love asking questions and just going with my curiosity. But I invite you to continue with what you've prepared, and I'm sure I'll interrupt again.
Please. I mean, I think the conversation's really, really, really valuable. And it's all coming out. Like all the important things are coming out. So I want to say a couple things about what I mean about self-care, because we've been saying a lot, like what does it look like? And I just want to say a few more things about that. I see self-care as finding ourselves, finding our inner resources, our vitality, our aliveness. Self-care is not only restoring so we can go back into battle. Mm-hmm. So there's, I think that's a really important piece of the puzzle. And some dear teachers really taught me that. And I think that's a really important one. I'm still learning it, but I think it's important. I think self-care is finding a way to live alongside suffering. People often say, and I'm sure they say it to you as well, to therapists, how do you deal with all this suffering? Like, how do you do your job? And I don't usually say this in session, but this is what I think. There is so much suffering in the world. Like, I'm living with it. We are all living with it, right? The question is how? That's the question. So I want to just then move into a couple of caveats about this, because this idea of being present and open and loving is really important. And the theoretical background that I work with, which is quite psychoanalytically influenced, does really talk a lot about countertransference and what you're picking up. So I want to just mention that, in that when we feel contempt, judgment, boredom, irritation, fear, these can be important signals in our clinical work when they relate to a particular client. So I feel that I would be remiss in having this whole conversation without saying that all those feelings are really important, and they contain information, and we have to allow ourselves our dislike, our anxieties, all those things, because they are telling us important things. And often when I'm feeling really terrible with a client, I remind myself, this is how they feel, they just can't show it to you. So I just had to make that little caveat before I continue.
Sure, thank you.
I'm just thinking about where we should go. I think I want to say a few more things. I said in that intro video that you posted on your blog, some of the signs of not having our self-care where it could be. I talked about boredom, irritation, being tired, being overwhelmed. I would also say things like distractibility and jumping from thing to thing, like jumpy mind. That can be a sign. When we read or hear something in the world and we just react to it rather than having a feeling, checking in, like when we lose our ability to reflect. And I think that's important. We see that all the time on social media. I think that's an important thing to notice about ourselves when our reflection goes away. When we're irritated and sharp with the people that we love and we know we don't mean it, we're just in the moment and we bark at them, I think that's a sign. And then I want to talk about busyness, because this is something that I think is also a sign. But wow, busyness is an illness. I want to say it's not that we don't have huge demands on our time. It's not that we don't feel the tension. Absolutely. The task of having families and jobs is huge. But it's the dealing with that dilemma directly is important. And when we just are constantly responding based on what comes into our phone primarily, then there is nobody at home. And at the end of the day, we've just responded. We haven't brought ourselves. So I think there is a difference, and busyness can really be used as, I see it used as an excuse, like I'm too busy. Well, then the way that you've worked your life is not in line with your values. And sometimes we have to sacrifice things that we really want because of things that are happening in our lives, like children or caretaking a parent. We may have other dreams, but that has to be consciously worked with rather than a Tasmanian devil style kind of manic response. So that's something that I really feel strongly about.
Let's dig into this one a little bit, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
First, you're so quotable. Busyness is an illness. That one's going to be in the class notes for sure. So, yeah, I mean, I can relate, and I'm sure many people listening can relate too to the responding or to going through periods in life where you want to pursue your dream, but you have all these other things going on, and you haven't tabled anything, put it on the shelf, whatever metaphor works for you guys, and you're trying to do it all, but it's it's too much, it's depleting you, and you're seeing all those signs. Maybe not boredom, but perhaps irritation and being overwhelmed, and maybe definitely shutting off to significant others because of the busyness in the mind. So that's something that also, as I talk about this, comes up, is the ability to shut down the mind, to go to sleep well, to not be carrying so much when it's time to rest. So anyway, I guess that's a summary, but I'm wondering too, when you say nobody's at home, we haven't filled our life with ourselves in order to then figure it out intentionally. And does this require constant vigilance? Right. So my answer, of course, is yes. I'm sure it does, because life is constantly changing. But is there some way where we can find a settled sense of, okay, I feel like I'm not reacting or only responding. Like I've got some sense of direction that I'm being purposeful about.
Mm-hmm. Well, yes, I believe this is a practice, and our culture is so higgledy-piggledy. I gotta say, like if you are a runner, I mean, if you talk to a runner, these people know all the stats. They know everything about their bodies, what they're doing. This is a good day, a bad day. They've got structures in place. They've got plans. And people who run marathons, they run all the time. And I think it's the same for us in terms of this takes time. Like the work of healing, the work of coming to ourselves, into ourselves. This is a practice that takes time. So for a time, it can seem impossible or constant vigilance is required. Mm-hmm. And I think that it then becomes part of you. Like every time I hit a roadblock, over time, then the gifts of the work just unfold, and I say, how can this be? It's amazing.
Yes, and I love that gentle reminder that it really is being our own therapist, because of course we know that it takes time, and that in the beginning it's all effort, or mostly effort, and then at some point it becomes part of who we are. And then there'll come a time or a season where we feel sort of discombobulated again, and and life invites us again to take a look at all those components and find that comfortable place. Not comfort in a way of like, resting, but comfort from the purposeful way of intention and managing our lives. So I think that as you talk about self-care, it's great to blend this idea of the way we live and our own healing with ways in which we can implement it practically. As you talk about runners, right? They have schedules. And I often find that my biggest problems come when I don't schedule myself, or my schedule, gets ahead of me. So I know that you have some, I don't want to, again, jump ahead, but I know that you are, as you talk, you're sharing practical things. So I want to say thank you for that, so that it's not just this, hey, live in self-care and heal yourself. And, but what does that mean for my daily life? What does that look like?
So I have a good chunk of things to say on that, which is kind of the part I'm most excited about, which is interesting. I want to say one more thing to set the stage.
Yeah.
And then I want to dive into this because I think it's going to be really interesting. So this is where I've come to with this. I started in therapy when I was working as a trader in the stock market, stressed out of my mind, like higgledy all over the place. You wouldn't have recognized me. And self-care started as like, come down, relax, get to know how I feel. And I think for many of our clients, this is the beginning, right? What I want to add to this is a piece, because this is a therapeutic audience, of what I've come to understand about self-care and what motivates me to do the work now. It's not just helping stressed out people relax. I believe that the extension of this work is actually work for our planet, whatever you believe about what should be done. It's work for children. It's work for the people who don't have what we are so fortunate to have. It is the path towards caring for everybody. And so as a result, oh yeah, this is the piece I want to say. As a result, this is actually really subversive work. It sounds very sort of candles and blah, 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 but it is not. It is hard work, because if we actually have our own feelings and our own selves, we will make our own choices. And the whole world is not set up for that type of agency. So I just want to really put that in perspective, in the sense that it's not easy, because there is a lot of, we're up against our culture in doing this work in a particular way. And there is great meaning to it. So that's something important that I wanted to share before we get practical.
Yes, I love it. Let's get more spiritual and abstract before we get practical. But
yeah,
I had another interview with John Harrison, and he has something called the True Calling Project, and he was talking about presence, and he came to this as well. It's something that he mentioned, which is about the global or the worldwide contribution that we make when we find our place or our purpose and we live in it, and we talked about purpose not being something that you go and seek and try to put together or find, but something that's woven within you. And, as you talk about it, yeah, and I don't want to use the word spiritual lightly, or like you said, like candles and meditation and things like that, but spiritual in the sense that when we do live from a place of purpose, when we live from a place of our own values, we make a difference. And that difference, it matters. It matters to our spouses, our kids, ourselves, our clients, our world now and in the future. So lovely. Awesome. Thank you.
Yes. All right, so I'm going to get a little practical.
Okay, it's time.
The first thing I want to say is we have to follow our own intuition. Like, we're all completely different people with different nervous systems and hopes and dreams and curiosities. So, like, I'm not following anyone's program, and I would never suggest anybody follow mine. But I'm going to share some things that have been really helpful for me. And the most important thing, like, I thought about when sharing this, is you can see how I'm thinking about my life. Like, the intentionality with which I'm putting this together is what I really hope to convey, because I think we need to be CEOs of our own life, you know. And I spend a great deal of time thinking about that. So this is how I structure my life. It's not for everybody, but this is mine. I'm in private practice, and I work very long days, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So like 8 to 8 long days. Obviously, I have a few breaks in there, but I work very long days those 3 days. And on Mondays and Fridays, I write, I read, I study, I do supervision, and I do my own analysis, those types of things. And I should just go back. My own analysis means my own therapy. It's kind of conjunct. And what I do is on Thursday night, when I finish my client time, I go and I have a massage with someone who is really a spiritual body worker. Like, we talk, and I release feelings, because there's a lot of feelings after three full days. A couple other things that I do. I spend 25 minutes every day in connection with myself in some form. There's an app called the Pomodoro app, which I just adore for all kinds of things. I highly recommend it. And it's like a little tomato timer, but it's an app. And I make sure I spend one Pomodoro, which is 25 minutes, on some type of set of practices. And the set of practices change, but I am breathing, connecting to myself, sometimes reflecting, sometimes praying. It depends, but I make sure that happens every day, and that makes a huge difference. Another thing, and this is going to sound a little woo-woo, and it did sound woo-woo to me when I first heard it, and it's not my training. It's not how I've been trained, and I know we got a lot of people with a lot of reviews, but I will tell you because it's helped me tremendously. Cleansing the energy in my office. What I found is that because I spend so many hours here and so much happens here, something energetically was weighing me down. And someone suggested this, and it's been really helpful. You can either ding a cymbal or a wind chime and walk around the space, or you can use sage and smudge it. Sometimes I'll use a little frankincense, and you just say an intention, like, I'm clearing the air. Thank you for the good work that's been done here. I welcome more good work. That type of thing. I found those types of practices really clear some of what's carried, what's in the field between me and my clients. So then that's sort of the structure. There's my own therapy. That's crucial. I think that every therapist should most of the time be in their own therapy of some kind. And that's a bit of a hard line I carry, but I think we should always be working on ourselves. And also we carry a lot, so we need to do that. Then I have this whole other set of practices that I go in and out of and I've explored that have really helped me. And I want to talk about 2 of them because they're very different and very exciting and not that well known. So the first one is called Continuum. I believe the website is continuummovement.org. And what Continuum is, it's a body working modality that it works with the fact we're 80% water, or whatever the percentage is. So, you know, like when we exercise, we move with muscle and bone. But Continuum works with subtle movements, wave movements, trying to access the fluidity that is us. Because we're fluid. And it also works with the permeability of the membrane between us and the other. That there isn't actually a line between us. Shocking. So it works with breath and sound and movement, and it has transformed me. It's been completely profound in terms of allowing myself to be here. So I wanted to mention that. And we can put some links in the notes as well. The other modality I want to talk to you briefly about and tell you about, and then we can chit chat, is it's called proprioceptive writing. And this is a modality that was found in the 70s by someone named Linda Metcalf, who developed it. And it is a practice. Again, I think it's proprioceptivewriting.org, but we'll find it. It is a practice of writing your own thoughts. It's, again, a 25-ish minute writing practice that is about, the instruction is listen to what you hear, write it down, and then be ready to ask the question, what do I mean by? And it sounds so simple. But the freedom of having our own thoughts, again, this is subversive and exciting and transformational. And when I'm allowed my own thoughts, when I'm allowed to think what I think, then all of a sudden I can let other people, because I'm not so tight, right? So it's very different from Continuum, but also extremely stimulating and valuable, I think, for any therapist. And all I'm doing with these two modalities is giving you like the slightest taste of these lifetime projects. But I just want to throw them out because I think some people in the profession are very drawn to staying in the profession, which is great. And then I think there's a lot that other modalities can add, a lot that other people have developed that can really help us as therapists. And I've found these two to be very restorative and continue to practice them. So I wanted to share them.
Thank you, Allison. It reminds me, I'm familiar with Linda Metcalf as a researcher, I think. It could be a different one, but I'll definitely look that up. And I recently came across Byron Katie's work too, and it's a similar type of idea. I think her book is called Loving What Is, and I'll include a link as well in the show notes for that. And it's a practice of recognizing our thoughts and then asking a series of questions related to what we're experiencing in that moment and what we're thinking in that moment. I'm curious, thank you for sharing the way that you implement self-care in a practical way on a daily basis, because I think that a big part of the struggle is getting to the daily habits, the daily living out in specific ways. I'm also curious if you have, I think you mentioned once that you live on a farm. So I'm curious if, I don't know, talk about how your environment impacts self-care, or, you know, if there are other things unrelated to reflection, if you enjoy outside time, or what that, I don't know, just I guess those other creative outlets maybe have nothing to do with the physical, or I mean, I don't mean the physical, but thinking, or things that are typically thought of as self-care practices.
Thank you for that, because absolutely, it's a huge, huge part. Thursday night, I have my massage and then I drive. It's about an hour and a half to the farm. And that's kind of where it all changes. I walk, I watch the cows, not my cows, but they're just so beautiful. And life has really changed. I only made that change in the summer. I used to live in the city, and it has made a big difference to just allow myself to be held differently. And I think you bring up a good point about environment and what we surround ourselves with, that it's not just about things and time blocks, but it's about how we are. And I would say that Continuum has really inspired me to allow myself to be more held by the world that I'm already in. So absolutely.
I think that, you know, as we think about ways to align our lives with our values and purpose and to take care of ourselves fully, it can be overwhelming. It can be overwhelming. Someone made a comment in my Facebook group today that sometimes having to reflect on our own self-care can bring up guilt about how we're not doing self-care. And that was fantastic because, yeah, that's not the intention of having these conversations. But I think, and I've experienced it certainly, that self-care can become a burden rather than an invitation to something new and different. And so I'm saying this for people, for the members, to say start small. Start with the main area that's getting to you. You don't have to change your environment and start new practices and reflect half an hour a day and overhaul your work schedule all at the same time. But it really is about, just one small step toward and staying on that path, on that vision of what it is that you want your life to look like. And that will change as you're on that path as well. So that's why presence is so important, as you mentioned.
Absolutely. And I think, like, if you listen to what we're saying and one thing stimulates you and you say, oh, I just want to go for a walk every day, or that writing, I know I need to do that writing. Like it's taking what your response is to whatever you hear, which is how we live. And then a little thing like this is ongoing. This is so ongoing, and everybody's life is so different.
What took you, was it the overwhelmed or stress, and I'm going back some, that took you from being a trader to being a therapist? Like, can you talk a little bit about the transition and how you found the field of therapy from your previous work?
Yeah, so I needed a therapist badly. And I found one who was wonderful. I was really blessed. And I started to get interested in her training. Like how did she come into this? And how is this working? Because I'm just talking. So I thought. And, my interest grew, and I started to take it part-time I went to school part-time while I was still working in the stock market. And, I always knew the stock market wasn't for me. I always knew. I am called to do some other work in this world. That's clear to me. And it was gradual, but in some ways not so gradual. And it just always felt right to me. I knew that I couldn't keep up the pace, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. It does. So in some ways, self-care really is the way in which we follow what we know.
Yes.
Yeah. What we know, like we start actually paying attention to what we know rather than, I guess, ignoring it or putting it off. But I think intentionally putting it off is fine too, because it's an act, it's a choice of saying it's not now. Like you mentioned earlier. Yeah. You mentioned earlier, like we're doing all these things and we have dreams, but perhaps the dreams need to be on hold. But we've chosen that to put them on hold in order to allow other things to be priorities for a time. Thank you for telling us about that transition. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. And I also want to say something about this busyness as an illness thing. I want to be very careful because my life is a particular way, because I have been through particular things and my nervous system is a particular way and I do particular work. But I admire greatly people who are very busy, who are doing a lot of things in terms of, parenting multiple children, and that's a busy life, or even just one. And also taking roles in this world that we need people to take. This is very important engagement with the world. So I in no way mean to suggest that we should all have a quiet schedule. And that's one of my bugaboos when somebody says, oh, you need to slow down. That bothers me because we have work to do. The question for me is how are we? You know, how are we in our soul? And if we are well, we are well.
Yes, that brings it all home. That brings it all to, like, the core of things. Almost like we talk, recently I was talking to someone about how different types of work for us as therapists, others might enjoy and we might not. So for example, some people might love working in homes with families and other people might really not enjoy that. So it's important to just be in touch with what works for us.
Absolutely.
Like you're saying, it's not about judgment or everyone should or any shoulds. Well, Allison, it's been so fun. Do you have anything else that you haven't shared with us about self-care or your own self-care journey that you'd like to add?
Yeah, there's just one thing that I can't believe I forgot.
Sure.
This is so obvious, but diet and supplements and exercise. I mean, again, we're not going to add to the shoulds. You do it at the pace you do it, but my health has been transformed through proper attention. You can imagine in the stock market, like type of food and alcohol and coffee and all this stuff. Not that coffee's bad. I love my coffee, but like it's the way we use it, right? It just transformed. And I have my hot water with lemon every morning and it just like starts everything right. And this is right for me. So I just really encourage an investigation with a knowledgeable professional about what supplements and diet are right for you, because I think it can have a huge difference. And we don't know when we're not eating well and not healthy. I think I didn't know how much better it could be. I just didn't know. So that's part of the healing journey, is to remother myself in that way.
I love the psychoanalytic language, the remothering. I love it. So for me, it's cozy. It feels like, like you're getting that hug. And yes, I can speak personally to this as well, because I have gone on my own very long journey with my relationship with food over the years. And it wasn't until I realized, until I was in what I would consider healthy or normal relationship with food, that I was able to be curious about how changes in my diet would impact my own energy, my own ability to be present and engaged, those kinds of things. So, there came a point where I could see food as sustenance and contribution to those things that mattered. And so I love you bringing this up, because I think, again, it can become such a checklist of, I got to diet, I got to exercise, but only do it from your own curiosity and interest, and start small. Like, I love to float. I know that this might sound strange to most people, but ever since I was a kid, I just love to float, and I've lived around water and those things. But now you've got like tanks, you can go float at like the local plaza. So that's something. While it's not exercise, it's physical, and it's like reconnecting to your own body. So these are just examples of things that there's so much that exists, and I'm sure that you have followed your curiosity and others are doing that. And I love hearing what others do. I think it's beautiful. Somebody told me they do like underwater hockey the other day. And I thought, I've never heard of that, but that's fascinating. Cool. Yeah. So anyway, I went off on a tangent, guys, so forgive me. But Allison, just thank you so much for sharing the beauty of self-care, as well as the practical ways that it can be implemented right now. And I want to give you a chance to just tell us a little bit about your work, where you're putting your energy and what you're putting out into the world right now, where people can find you, and anything else you'd like to share with the members.
Sure. So I have a weekly blog. It comes out at 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time every Tuesday. And I write about therapy and life and intersection of those things. It's a lot of people really, really like it, and it's very close to my heart. So I would love to have you on the list. The website is thegoodtherapist.com, and you can subscribe there. And then there's two other kind of things I have going. One is I have a mini course. It's delivered by email. It's a course to help you make more progress in your therapy. And it's basically a set of prompts and questions and worksheets. And there's an MP3 that you get sent on, I think, day 4 that give you sort of nudges in the direction of new things you could think or talk about when it comes to your process in therapy. So you can also sign up for that on my website. And the final thing is I'm working towards some workshops that I'm going to be giving. And I don't know all the details on that, but I really like the in-person experiential work. So I'm putting it out there that that's something that will be coming in 2017.
Fantastic. Well, keep us posted on the progress, and I'll share it in our community. Thank you again, Allison, for your time and just the love with which you shared your own journey, not just in self-care, but in your life, which I think is really our own, all of our life stories is about how we take care of ourselves and how we go through experiences that bring up new knowledge. So thank you for sharing that with us today.
It has been a deep pleasure. Thank you, Ellie.
Sure.